the best place to get coffee and donuts, and I think our most popular one was the best places to stop for the toilets in Manhattan.
Hello, Matthew Grant here, your host of the Instech London podcast and partner at Instech London. Well, how's your week been? Getting out and about a bit more? Now, we may be based in the UK, but innovation has no boundaries, and it's great to see that over half of you are listening in from outside of the UK. In fact, 25% of you from the US, over 1,000 each in Australia and Germany, and if you are our one fan in Bolivia, Botswana, Belarus or Guernsey, please do hang in there. We really value your support. Last week, Robin and I have been talking to people in France, Germany, Israel and the US, and finally we're seeing people back in their offices. Still fairly quiet, but the signs are encouraging. It's somewhat apt, therefore, that this episode was recorded at the last face-to-face meeting I held back in March earlier this year in the Brighton offices of Inshur with David Daiches, co-founder of Mobility MGA Inshur. Now, you may have heard us talking to Paul Doran, VP of Marketing for Inshur, on stage at one of our face-to-face events in April last year, recorded on episode 26. So in this episode, I learn a little bit more about the history of the company, why they've been so successful, and what they've been doing in the last 12 months. And also hang in there to the end for a recent update on what's been happening since we spoke to David in Brighton. David, it's wonderful to be here down in Brighton. This is Instech on Tour. You were founded in 2016 and you're the only fully digital insurance platform for today's commercial and rideshare drivers, owners and fleets. You've got a team based here in Brighton. You're also in New York. According to Crunchbase, you've got funds raised of $11 million. We've had Paul Doran, your VP of Marketing, talking to us a year ago. I think a lot has been happening since then. But first of all, it'd be just great to hear a little bit about you and your backstory.
We started, Dan was working at a broker in Manhattan that was looking after the yellow cab market. He saw the opportunity with a complete different demographic. The average age of a yellow cab driver was about 56, and they were very happy to come into a broker's office and fill in some forms and have a chat. And then when Uber came to town in about 2011, 2012, the whole demographic changed to sort of average 27, 28, and they don't want to talk to anyone, sort of let alone be in somebody's office. So that's where the idea was sparked for Dan, in terms of, well, we could build an app so these people could use the same tool that they're using for their commercial life for buying their insurance.
You're an MGA, so you are providing insurance to, as we said earlier, to rideshare drivers. I think Uber is one of your big partners out there. But just from a practical point of view, how do the drivers interact with Inshur?
We provide sort of commercial auto insurance at the moment for rideshare drivers, although we've got some new verticals launching this year. We can get all the information from certainly in New York, from the barcode on the back of their professional driver's license. So the idea was to give them a seamless customer experience. So through scanning the barcode, we can then get their driving license details, the professional license, their car details. So in a perfect example, it's just a case of adding an email address, a telephone number, and confirming the registration of their vehicle. Our quickest interaction has been less than 3 minutes from someone starting to actually getting their documents provided.
And do you find that people who are driving cabs are amenable to using an app to buy insurance? I mean, not all of them are very technologically astute.
We did a lot of research. So before we launched, Dan and I would go and ride around all day in Ubers, getting our little prototype out and showing them, and the feedback was very good. I think Dan used to describe the old-fashioned way of buying it as a barbaric process. It could take 2 or 3 visits to the broker's office, and with lots of time in between. So we found from using an app, they're using Uber to sort of run their their business. They're using Grubhub to order their food and Expedia to book their travel. So I think getting them to use an app was quite a logical step. The challenge we had was trying to get people to part with $4,500 on an app. The challenge we had was people didn't know the name, so they'd be ringing up the office to say, I like your app, I just want to check you're a real company. And obviously over time, as we've built the brand, that's become less of an issue. But I think the challenge in the early days was proving that we weren't a scam rather than getting people to use a mobile app.
And that point about building the brand is clearly very important to you. When Paul was talking to us last year, he sort of talked about the power of the sort of network effect of the drivers, often who've got extended families or come from the same communities. Can you just talk a little bit about how, building on that point, how you market and sell to people and how you do build that credibility with them?
Most of our referrals come from word of mouth. The driver community, probably more so in New York than UK, but they tend to be tight-knit communities. So if someone drives, their brother drives, their uncle drives, their father drives. So what we've tried to do is work with those communities. So we do community events, we sponsor the sort of Little League baseball in some of the communities. There's a big Spanish-speaking community. We make sure that our support people are multilingual. So I think between the 8 of them, we speak 13 languages. And we try and present things in a way that is relevant to each individual community rather than taking it as a one size fits all.
A little bit about the technology then. So you're obviously using data a lot to be able to understand your drivers. Does that also come into the pricing?
It's different in the UK and New York. In New York, the pricing regulation is quite tight, so we have to file rates, and they are sort of based on sort of relatively traditional rating factors. So we can't use that data in New York at the moment, although we are in conversations with the regulator. In the UK, yes, we do. So we use things like Uber rating. It's a very predictor of the frequency of a claim. We see our differentiator, and this is with any markets that we may go to in the future, is there a data platform that we can use to get additional information that allows us to give the driver a better price?
Are you actually tapping into the telematics then? So is it based on the driving performance, or is it other characteristics that you use in the UK for the rating?
At the moment, no. We've done a couple of trials with different telematics SDKs. For me, the jury's out a little bit still on telematics in terms of its applicability. There's a lot of data there, and I think it has a whole lot of complexity to bring telematics into the mix. And I think for us, we haven't worked out whether the return on investment is there yet. But we've done a couple of trials and we're monitoring it very closely.
Yeah, no, it can make sense. And an SDK is software developers kit, for anybody who doesn't know that.
Yeah, so that allows us to take someone else's telematics solution and embed it within our app.
And what about the insurance itself? So do the drivers actually need to turn that on when they're driving their cars, or is the technology smart enough to figure out when they're all connected perhaps to one of the Uber apps to know when they're driving?
So in New York, the regulations are such that all drivers need a professional license. That's unique to New York. It's different in the other 49 states. In the UK and most of mainland Europe, it's the same model. So we are targeting those full-time professional drivers rather than the part-time sort of gig drivers. So
the drivers for the New York that require a license, is that the medallion that yellow cab drivers need to have, or is that something separate?
It's called a TLC license, a Taxi and Limousine Commission. So it's not a medallion as such, but they need that professional license.
Good. And presumably, as the more you're underwriting people, the more you're learning about different risk profiles of the drivers. Any sort of themes you see, anything surprising you about the characteristics that you need to take into account? I guess if it's risk selection rather than rating in the US, given the regulation. But what sort of things are you seeing that are interesting to you?
We can see some of the macro trends emerging, like the volume of electric cars versus traditional fuel. We do a lot of analysis on this sort of mix of vehicle types. So it's a Toyota Camry is the most popular car in New York. Then we see sort of little concentrations around different areas where sort of different communities live. So I don't think anything necessarily from a pricing perspective, but certainly it's interesting in terms of the demographics of our driver base. I think it's about 5% females in New York, which has grown slightly since we launched.
And that was on that electric versus the traditional fuels. Is there anything you can share about the difference in the risk profile between an electric car or the driver of an electric car perhaps versus a petrol car?
I think in general terms, the electric vehicle users tend to be a better risk. So the frequency tends to be lower because they are, typically people who are more aware of the environment, and the cost of the vehicle is usually more expensive, so they tend to look after it more. I guess the flip side is on the severity. The cost of repair can be quite significant. A friend of mine had pranged his Tesla bumper the other day, and it was a sort of £4,000 and 2 months job to get it replaced. What you gain on the frequency, you lose on the severity.
Great. And as you said at the beginning, there's not many people doing this out there. You've got this ability to people to underwrite or to get beyond risk within 3 minutes. I mean, who else how extensive is this market now in terms of competition? Because it seems like the technology is fairly widely available. Are there quite a few people coming into this space?
Not in New York. So New York is there are two main carriers that provide probably 80% of the market. And it's a broker model traditionally, and I think that still works well for them. I think it's that challenge for any incumbent if they want to move to a direct-to-consumer model. When they've got a big broker network, you've got to do that very quickly and very well, or else you you're in limbo. And New York is quite a difficult market to break into. There's lots of regulation. Rates need to be filed, which can take 7 or 8 months. In the UK, it's a much more open space, with less regulation around the pricing, obviously more regulation around the operation, but to get pricing approved can take 6 months. In the UK, you need to obviously be regulated by the FCA, which can take some time, but pricing there's less control over. So they're quite different markets in a sense. And
the relationship with Uber, I believe you do work with other insurance companies as well, but do they help you with the distribution of the product?
Yeah, so they have a panel of five insurance companies, and all of those companies are allowed to work within the green light hubs. We get some marketing support from them. We do events. So that's, as a distribution channel, that works really well for us.
Good. And then talking about marketing, I noticed on the website, your blog, you're actually communicating, by the looks of things, to your drivers. So one of the ones I saw there recently is that you can talk about helping your drivers find out where the crowds were, so you can give them some advice about places to go to pick up passengers. Is that right? Yeah,
and it's something we've been very passionate about from the beginning, is building that brand. So we have a monthly newsletter called The Surge, and one of the things that's worked really well on that is helping people with big events, both in the UK and in New York, so they can sort of plan their work schedules. Also, the best place to get coffee and donuts, and I think our most popular one was the best places to stop for the toilets in Manhattan.
So you could have a side business of the best toilets in New York.
Yes.
So David, we just switched microphones now because we had some drilling going on in the background. But what I'd be interested in is, we're down here in Brighton, and it's not a natural home for insurance. There's quite a big technology scene down here, and certainly quite a strong creative community as well. But what are some of the sort of opportunities and challenges you see being based down here versus being based in an insurance hub in a major city?
I think what Brighton gives you, there is a big talent pool down here, and there's quite a lot of people who are getting up early and commuting up to London. So there's quite a rich pool to tap into of people who maybe don't want to carry on that commute. And also, we're looking outside of Brighton, so we're doing some recruitment in the rest of the UK. So it's an easy place to get people to relocate to, and also we've done some recruitment from the EU as well, bringing people over. So I think it's a place that where people want to live, and I think if we have that benefit of people living very close to the office, that whole well-being is enhanced, and I guess the culture within the company benefits from that.
Well, it's a great office you got here. If it wasn't quite so cloudy outside, I think we might even be able to see the sea as well.
Yeah.
So I can see why people would choose to work down here versus being in London. But in terms of the skills for people you look for, what are the sort of hardest things to recruit for these days? Because there's lots of competition for talent out there, but what are the toughest roles to fill, and how do you encourage people to come and work for you?
Yeah, good question. I think the market it's quite competitive. I think finding people who've got a good mix of insurance understanding, tech understanding, and have that sort of growth and entrepreneurial mindset. We have recently had a new VP of people starting who has been a breath of fresh air in terms of, I think, challenging some of maybe the insurance stereotypes and the way a traditional insurance company might work. So we do things like 30 days holiday, well-being allowance to people. Everyone has a personal training budget that they can go to any conferences or buy any books from Amazon that they want. And it's a two-way street. We want the best people, but we also need to demonstrate that we're a great company as well. And it's I think hiring, as you say, and for a growth company, it's critical. It's very easy to go too quickly and hire the wrong people, and you pay for that later on. Sometimes if you take a bit longer, you might have to wait a little bit to deliver some of your plans. But I think long term, we're trying to build a great company for the future.
Well, clearly it's working for you because you've been growing pretty rapidly in what sounds like quite an effective way. Can you just talk a bit about what's happened in the last 12 months since we spoke to Paul, and then what you're looking forward to in the years ahead or the year ahead? Yeah,
sure. So I think we've grown pretty quickly. So we were about sort of 10 to 15 people at the end of 2018. I think we're hoping to get to about 140 by the end of this year. Also in the last year, we've delivered sort of two major projects. Our Flex product, which allows drivers to, rather than take the traditional 30 or annual policies, they can choose any period from 7 to 90 days. And that was delivered on the back of a lot of the feedback we got directly from the drivers in Uber hubs. And we launched our Inshur Pro product in partnership with Uber at the beginning of this year, which is providing exclusive insurance cover and discounts for drivers with Uber Pro status.
That reminds me of your earlier comment about the drivers' rating influences their insurance. A reminder for all of us, when we are rating our Uber driver, we might ultimately be impacting the costs of their insurance. Do you see opportunities moving beyond commercial ride sharing into some other kinds of automotive or even indeed other areas of insurance?
Absolutely. So, the way we see mobility is changing, across everything. So the pizza delivery guy is gone. It's now Deliveroo, Uber Eats. In terms of actually owning a car, it's going to subscription models, or you get an Uber. We want to provide smart insurance for the new mobility era. What do we mean by that? We see a lot of companies coming into the market, but if there isn't a good insurance product behind these new platforms, that they aren't able to operate. So we want to become a sort of a seamless part of that ecosystem to allow these new mobility companies to easily launch and expand into new territories by providing an insurance product that fits in with the needs of them and their customers. And what we look for in that is some kind of data platform where we can take a traditional insurance product and make it more relevant for the consumer of today.
Well, we're delighted to have Inshur as a corporate member of Instech London. You were at some of our very early events. I'd just be interested to know what it is that you see the benefits from a community like Instech in terms of whether it's the brand of Inshur or your team or something else out there.
It's a really strong community in London. We've seen some of the companies grow as we've grown. It's a sort of community where we want to see everybody do well, and it doesn't feel like competition. And I think we've got more to learn from each other than we have to be afraid of. And I think, sharing war stories, advice on how to get funded, how to get capacity. I'm always happy to talk to anyone if they want any advice about that, as people helped us when we were looking for those kinds of things. So I think it's a very open and sharing community.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts now, but also to that final offer. Well, Dave, we've covered a lot there. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you think is important to mention just now? Yeah,
I think I'll end with a couple of pieces of advice, I think, to any sort of up-and-coming in InsurTech or any technology company. I think the two things that I've found to be most important in growing Inshur is number one, focus on the execution. Lots of people have great ideas that never get past the drawing board or end up as 90% completed projects. So work out what you're going to do and focus on the execution. And I think the second thing, which is particularly relevant in insurance, it's make yourself easy to do business with. You're going to have to work with the regulator, with capacity providers, with third-party technology companies. And it's a mantra that I drum into everyone in the company is make every experience with an Inshur person or team a positive one. And that's how you'll help your business grow.
Excellent. Well, David, that's been really interesting hearing the journey so far in building Inshur. And I'm about to go off now and talk to your team, who you've, I think, bribed with some lunch to hear me talk about what I'm seeing going on in the world of innovation and insurance. And I'm sure we're going to have some very interesting and fascinating questions. So looking forward to that as well. But again, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Of course, a lot has happened since I spoke to David, and not many people have been taking taxis in the last few months. So I caught up a week ago with Paul Doran, VP of Marketing, to get a quick update from him on how Inshur have been getting on since I saw them in Brighton.
Well, first and foremost, it seems like a lifetime ago since we were together back in March, my goodness. And yeah, a lot has happened. Globally, we are active in New York and we're active in the UK. And without question, the lockdowns have had a big impact on the movement of people in cities. And, we've seen in certain cities up to an 80% reduction in the number of vehicles moving around, obviously, as people are just not there. I think a couple of things that have really come out. We've seen an incredible resilience amongst our customers. There was perhaps a bit of a peak of panic late March, where customers wanted to change policies, cancel policies, but that really ended quite quickly, and there was a rapid drop-off, and there has been a relatively small, slow recovery, but we've not seen any further dips. And I think it proves a resilience amongst customers. We were quick to respond. We allowed prorated refunds without penalties, and most of our drivers are on 30-day policies. And so we really worked hard to give them flexibility. And, our data is showing us now, so from a kind of a low point of 80% reduction, we're now seeing kind of 35% of drivers now of our customers back out on the roads, with cities like Manchester and London kind of really leading the charge. And equally, some of the other metrics, we saw rather more fun metrics, things like the average speed of vehicles increasing from maybe like 15 miles an hour up to 20 miles an hour as there was nothing on the road. So we've seen a change, but we've seen a resilience and actually a stabilized recovery is what we're seeing now, or it's what our data's showing.
Inshur are one of the many companies supporting us at Instech London, and despite our lack of face-to-face events in the last few months, we've been delighted to hear that so many of our members are still finding their business partners, employees, investors, insurance capacity, or just advice through the activities that they're doing with us and our other members. So contact me via LinkedIn, or any of us, through hello@Instech London to find out more about what we offer to corporate members. And if you want to get up to date with what we're doing each week, the news you think is worthy of note, or just what we're thinking, then you can follow us with our weekly newsletter. You can find that on the website, plus everything else we're up to, www.instech.london. Just click the top right yellow button. And finally, if you are one of our friends listening in from a remote part of the world please do make contact and let us know what we're up to. Maybe we'll even get you onto a podcast one of these days. Thank you.